Welcome to Hunters and Unicorns, the 2020 Mastery Mission. 20 topics, 20 guests for 20 minutes. We're here to unlock the tribal wisdom to help you get one step closer to mastery. I'm Simon Koutis and I'm joined by my co-host Ollie Kune.
Welcome to the show, everyone.
And we're absolutely delighted to welcome Bart Van De Burgt. Bart, welcome to the show.
Thank you, guys. Happy to be here.
Amazing. Welcome to the show, Bart.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
In the way of an introduction, Bart, you're currently Regional Sales Director Benelux at Zscaler. And whilst you obviously have a vast experience within the world of software sales, by your own admission, it was your experiences at Fuse where it really all came together, where you were obviously, well, you were exposed to the likes of Luca Lazaron, Cedric Pesch, Andy Byron, amongst many of the other kind of playbook legends. And obviously, true to that lineage, you're at Zscaler, really following that amazing playbook, which has brought you such incredible success.
Correct. Yeah. That's why I came here to follow Dali Rajesh and see what he could teach me on my pursuit to mastery, my own pursuit to mastery, as we call it here. Yeah.
Absolutely. So we have 20 minutes, Bart, could you please introduce your topic?
Yeah, the topic of today is, why are deals won and lost in discovery, or deals are won and lost in discovery?
Oh, it's an incredible subject, Bart. So look, diving straight in. So, why is this subject so important to you, and why is it so important to the playbook?
Well, I think in the playbook, there's been a lot of talk about pain and champions and why you need them to do a deal, right? Without pain, there's no need to change. And without a champion, there's nobody fighting for you to get that change in place. But you can't really get to a pain without having a level of understanding. And in order to get that understanding, you need to do discovery. You need to ask the right questions. You need to get an understanding of what is it where the customer is today and why would they need to change. So really, through that discovery, you get that understanding, and through that understanding, you build trust, and through that understanding and trust, you get in a position to build a champion. So really, there is no pain in champions without discovery.
Yeah, you talk a lot about the need for it's change management in essence. So, you're trying to drive change. Why is discovery important to drive change, and how would it help our viewers and our listeners in their quest to close more deals?
Yeah, so I think one is, of course, if you're a sales rep, ideally you want to crush your numbers. So you want to go beyond your numbers as much as possible. So you want to do more deals and you want to do bigger deals. And typically when you want to sell transformational deals, or you want to have transformation done in the company, it starts with change. And change is hard. People don't want to change, right? People don't want to change. So if you want to force a change, you would first need to have people understand, why does that change need to happen? So what's wrong with the situation that you're in, and why is it broken? So what are the negative consequences that arise from where you are today? And typically what happens is people don't see it. So people are in that situation every day. So they don't see what's broken. They don't experience the negative consequences very, very consciously. So you almost need to be therapeutic in your conversations and having a conversation to bring those things to the forefront and have them realize that, hey, the things that I'm experiencing right now, the processes that we're going through, this is not right. They're broken. It's taking too much time. Too many people are involved. But that's not top of mind for people because they're so busy getting the day-to-day done. So in order for people to justify change, you need to really get it top of mind, not just with one person, but with a whole team of what is it that you are doing today? What is it about what you're doing today that's not working? How would you want it to be tomorrow? And what good things would happen if you would get to that place tomorrow? And how would we get there? So those are really the questions that we would need to ask and understand to drive that change.
Sure. So going into the topic, diving straight in, what are the kind of the fundamental tenets which are required, or what that really underpin discovery?
Well, I think discovery really is, in court, you would say discovery is the collection of information that could help you state your case. And I think it's no different in court than it would be in sales, right? It's really about finding all the information that could help you make either a good impression or drive that change or get your deal done. And if you look at the fundamental elements, it's really points in time. So the first discovery really starts before you even met your customer. So even before you meet the first person, you don't want to go in and ask the obvious questions. You don't want to go and ask them how much annual revenue do you do, or how many employees do you have, or what's top of mind for you. So it first starts with just doing your homework. So a lot of the discovery where you start, the fundamental piece is understanding what is that business doing, how do they make money, what are the existential threats that they have, who are their competitors, what are their competitors doing, what's happening in the market. That sounds like a lot, but it actually helps you accelerate your sales cycle so much further when you do that homework, and you can get to a point of having a business conversation much faster. And if you get to a business conversation, you can really start looking for the one thing that you need to drive change, which is pain. Because if there's no pain, people will not change. So I think it's really about, firstly, doing your homework, understand what's going on in the market, what's going on in that business, what top initiatives are they driving, who would be running those initiatives. And once you have that, you can start to ask the probing questions that could lead you to the point of having, let's say, having identified a justified reason for change.
It's a really interesting subject. I think when we last spoke, I definitely felt myself drawn into when you started to talk about the mindset and the curiosity. Can you give us a bit more insight into that, please, Bart?
Yeah, so I think in terms of the mindset, I think discovery is typically a stage in the sales cycle. It's at the beginning. But I think in reality, discovery never stops. So you do discovery prior to meeting the customer, to getting an understanding of what's the reason they would need to change, what's the pain, who could be. So that's the initial stages. But really, discovery goes all throughout the sales cycle. And it really starts about the first stage of, let's say, discovery would be to answer a question about why would the customer need to change? What's broken and what would they need to change? And then as you advance, you start looking at, okay, what's the reason they need to change? It's typically down to a few fundamental problems. So what are the main problems that they're having, and what is the impact or what are the negative implications of that problem? And how would we measure that? That's the first stages. So then people come to the conclusion, okay, maybe it is right to change, right? Maybe we do need to solve these problems. Maybe I do need to, in my own, lose weight, go to the gym, to make it a personal example. But then the next thing is, what are we going to do about it? What's the best way to solve these problems? That's the second stage of it. So first it's, let's identify that there is a problem. Let's get people on board with the problem. So I think it's firstly asking the questions, documenting it. And I think that's a step that's very often neglected. It's documenting and playing back your understanding to the prospect. Like, look, we've had this conversation. These are the notes I took. Can we look over them together? So that way you build a mutual understanding. And through that mutual understanding, you build consensus and you justify the need to change. And that you can then share with multiple people. So that's really the first change, is why do we need to change? And what are the negative consequences of not changing? I think that's the most, let's say, important question we need to answer initially before going anywhere else.
Yeah, and I suppose with that in mind, obviously, with regards to obviously the mindset of discovery, how do we then take it to the next level? So obviously we've now identified that there is a potential need. Where do we go from there?
Yeah, so typically when you've identified, let's say, that the current situation is unsustainable and it's not right to stay where you are today, you would then move into, okay, so what would be the best ways to start solving this problem? This is actually the point where, as a salesperson, this is where you make your money, right? Because if you've done your work right and you've documented the case for change, right? So you've documented together with, hopefully by then, your champion. This is why, let's say, company XYZ needs to change. These are all the things that would happen to us if we don't change. Then by that time, there's a level of trust. Then you can also start to use that trust to start meeting some other stakeholders and to start brainstorming about, so what would be the best way to solve these problems? And you can almost see it as, here's let's say, situation A, and here's situation B. If you want to get from A to B and there's water in the middle, you're going to need to build a bridge. And that bridge is actually going to be the required capability. So what would be required to get from A to B? And logically, what would be required is the solution you sell. So you're going to help to architect a solution that they need to get from A to B. And if you do that right, there's only one solution that can really solve that problem, and that's going to be yours. So the more specific you can be in defining the journey or the bridge from A to B, the higher the probability will be that you will win the deal.
But I know you're quite specific on how that should be articulated in terms of, not presenting your solution, but providing a solution to the problem. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I think in sales, the very, very common mistake that we make is we talk a lot about how good we are. So we talk a lot about what capabilities we have and how our solution is faster, cheaper, more reliable than the other thing. And I think typically what happens is if we do that, the person at the other side of the table starts recognizing themselves in the solution. So they start thinking, hey, we actually have some of that. Our solution is cloud. Our solution is available everywhere that we have today. And it achieves the opposite of change. It achieves the result that they want to stay where they are because they recognize themselves in the solution. What we need to do is we need to get the customers to recognize themselves in the problem. So we actually need to, the biggest thing we need, and that's why we come to selling change, the biggest thing we need to sell is the problem they have. So the first thing we need to do is focus on the current state of the customer, focus on the current state they're in and what negative implications might occur. And this all goes all the way back to spin selling, right? So what I'm telling you here is nothing new, but it's really hard and it's very easily forgotten. So it actually takes you back to the early days. Where are you today? What are the things that are broken? Who's impacted by it? How often does it happen? And as soon as you understand that, then the need for change becomes very obvious.
So, Bart, you talk about obviously the discovery mindset at the beginning. So, when we're looking at the three whys, do they have to already exist, or does the discovery also help us understand if we need to invest more time to create it, or if they're not there, do we just simply walk away? How do we get the balance of knowing where we are and whether to move forward or step away?
Well, I think that's two questions in one. So one is a qualification question and the other is, are they there? So in an initial deal, there's always going to be a reason to change. It's whether or not we can find it or not. That's really the thing. And I think a common mistake that we make is that we think that we're going to find the three whys in one meeting. We're going to think we're going to have one conversation, and in that one conversation, we're going to understand what's broken with that company, where would they want to be in the future, and what good things would happen. What's the best way to solve that problem, and why should they do it now? It's a process, right? It's a process. So I think you need to love the process, and you need to love the fact that you're puzzling it together. So very often, it just understands with a very rudimentary understanding of, let's say, the three key problems that a business has. So you have your first meeting, and that's the very rudiment. That's the why anything. It starts with a very rudimentary, let's say, question. I believe you're running into these three problems. You're having a high security risk. Your infrastructure is almost falling apart, and you have an initiative to move to cloud that you need to support. So these are the three problems, Mr. Customer. Are they correct? And then you play back your understanding to that customer in a one-to-one meeting with your champion or with a potential champion, and you start to verify what your understanding is. And it's very important that in that meeting you're vulnerable. So you're vulnerable. You say like, "Hey, Oli, this is what I've written down. It might not be 100% accurate, but this was my understanding from the meeting. Could you please correct it so that if you and I partner up together, we can make this understanding better, and we can actually help you focus on the right problems that matter to you." So it starts with a very rudimentary understanding of the problem, and from there on out, you can start focusing on negative consequences, implications to the business, implications to certain parts of the business, certain departments, and then work your way up to metrics. But it really is a process, and you can't start talking about how to solve the problem. So you can't start talking about yourself really until you understand what the problem actually is. Because if you start talking about yourself and how good you are, but there's no problem, you're wasting your own time.
As you spend more time in these points of discovery, and as you get further into the process, is it common for the whys to dramatically change, or?
They might change, yeah. I've seen them change quite dramatically as the higher up you move into your organization, because the why for somebody lower in the organization is typically not the same as the why for somebody at the top of the organization. So it is very, very important that you document and work on the three whys as well as you can together with your champion to earn yourself the right to go out and meet, let's say the ultimate decision maker, or as we call it, the economic buyer, so that you can validate your understanding of what's important, but also so that you can start to understand what's really important to that business. Because what's on top of mind for the CFO might not be the same for the head of infrastructure. And ultimately, the CFO would need to sign off. So it's better you're aligned to what the CFO thinks important than the person you're working for at that point in time.
But we often find, that in kind of engagement with clients, a lot of the time, they can be impatient, they do want a solution, or, they're looking for value. How do you find the balance between discovery and bringing value to the customer, especially when they're putting pressure on you or you're in a competitive situation against other vendors? How are you able to kind of carve that time out?
Well, I think it's very, very important that it's always a give to get, right? So no conversation could just be just you asking questions. So you should always go into a conversation where you're looking to get certain information, or you're looking to get parts of an understanding with, hey, what could we give in return? So sometimes a very good way to open up a customer to admit some of their own flaws is to tell a customer story. So if you tell a customer story about, hey, we work with customer XYZ, and they went through a dramatic change. They had a large transformation going on, and in this transformation, they struggled with getting their users access to all of the cloud applications that they needed to in sufficient time. They also struggled with getting these applications secured within the time frame that they needed to be, so it exposed them to risk. And very often when you tell that story, the customer is going to think like, hey, this is not just my issue. There's other customers that have that same issue, and they'll open up. So it's always going to be a balance between give or get. Because if you're going in there like Inspector Gadget or just interrogating the hell out of them, it's going to be a very, very brief conversation, and it's going to be one meeting and you're done.
So what do you think are the most common pitfalls in all of this, Bart? What are where do salespeople really fall down in this process?
Yeah, so firstly, I think it's talking too much about ourselves. So we go into a first meeting, and all we talk about is how good we are, that we're a leader in the Magic Quadrant, that we have customers so and so, but we don't really take the time to listen and understand. So that's probably the first common pitfall. The second is we talk just about product, and we don't talk about their business. So we go in there and do the same thing, but we don't talk about what would be the reasons for the customer to change. And that comes down to do your homework. So we don't always do enough of the homework. And I think another thing that we do is the minute we recognize a symptom of a problem that we recognize from another customer, we start to pitch the solution. But there's no urgency to change yet. So the minute the customer says, yeah, we actually we need to improve our security posture, we tend to do like, oh, that's great. We have solution X, Y, and Z that could help you with improving your security posture, without really understanding why they would need to improve their security posture and what would be the consequences if they don't, and who else would be impacted by it. So I think those are some of the pitfalls that I've seen quite regularly in my own sales cycles when I was selling, but also with my team, I sometimes see it. And what happens then is you come into let's say you do 4 meetings in the sales cycle, and then you go in like the twilight zone where the deal is stalled and you can't get anywhere. But you're looking at each other with the customer like, what are we doing? Yeah, I don't know. It's very uncomfortable, but it happens. Yeah.
So that's a kind of a typical example of really, slowing down in the sales cycle. Tell us a little bit more about that, because I think that is quite important, Bart.
Yeah, so I think as a sales rep, we often think that we're in control, but there's a limited amount of things that we can give to the customer. I think the gives are typically in the form of they want our pricing, they want to get their hands on the technology, and they want to speak to a reference, and in that case, they don't need us anymore. And they want to get that as fast as possible. But really what we need to understand is why would the customer need to change? What is the impact to them of not changing, i.e. what is the business case and what is the value that I can sell my solution at? Who would be the ultimate decision maker, and how can I work my way up to that person? So what we need to do is then make sure that we have, let's say, a good give to get in that sales cycle. But really it starts with helping your customer understand why they would need to change. Because in a sales cycle that you see, I think over 50% of deals are loose to, let's say, the status quo, to do nothing. So over 50% of the deals are lost to do nothing. And you've probably seen this in sales cycles with your reps if you work with them, that they get to a person that says, yeah, we need to change this. But that person would then need to involve 5 other stakeholders that he also needs to convince of the need to change. And that's typically where it already goes wrong. So they can't internally justify what the need for change is. So they never really get to the point where they're going to look at solutions or products to solve that problem. So the real thing that you need to do, and that's actually where we need to slow down, is to justify the change and get people on board with the fact that the change is justified and required. And only then should we start talking about what is the best way to solve that problem. And yeah, ideally, of course, the best way to solve that problem is with us.
So I suppose in terms of real kind of things to try, Bart, for those that are listening or watching, what can they implement that can really help with this?
Yeah, so I think if you look at different points but I think the biggest thing that I've seen is really before your first meeting, really do your homework on the customer and really start noting what is the company objective, what do they want to achieve, what are the strategies that they have in place. We call that at Zscaler, we call it a value pyramid. There's many other businesses that use the same. But if you really hone in on what does a customer want to achieve, what are their business strategies, what initiatives can I find and who owns them, and what, let's say, challenges can I envision other customers had when they went through similar things. If you really do that homework, you're going to set yourself up for a lot more success. And then during that meeting, so that's prior to that meeting, and then you work out, let's say, a question funnel of questions that you could ask in order to identify where potential problems might be. So that would be prior. So if you're a rep, sit down with your leader and really brainstorm about, hey, I've worked so hard to get this meeting in the diary. We're meeting the CIO. I've worked my ass off to get it in. Let's sit down and prep that meeting to make sure we convert it into an opportunity and we can work towards that big deal. So that would be prior. Then in that meeting, I always encourage everyone to, in their notebook, make a diagram of 6 boxes. So you create a diagram. If you still do, paper or pen. In the left, you set the current state. So that would be all the things that they have, right? Everything about number of employees, number of sites. If you sell CRM, what current CRM do they have? What capabilities do you have? And then right next to it, you set the negative consequence. So what bad things would arise from that? And then to the right of that, you would then say metrics. So what is the implication of those things? And then towards the bottom of your chart, you start writing down future state, positive business outcomes. So what good things would happen if you get there? And then in the bottom right, you write required capabilities. What would be required to get from current state to future? If you write those things down, it's really, really good if you do it, because it tells you by looking at your notepad, hey, I haven't spent time on the metrics yet. I don't know how to quantify the business case. Or we have talked about the current state. We understand the problems, but we don't know where they want to get to or how they're going to get there, required capabilities. So the sooner you start with that, the sooner you can start to take control of the conversation. And then the sooner you have that understanding. So that would be during the meeting. And then what you do after is really play back that understanding to your customer. These were the notes that I've taken about your current situation and the problems you're running into. Right, this is the notes that I've taken on the future situation of where you want to be and how you would want to achieve that. Can you give me some feedback on that? Who else would care about this? And that's really how you build up that momentum and meet other stakeholders in the deal. And the more people you meet and the more people you get on board with your idea, the more people you're going to get, let's say, on that train towards success with you.
Amazing. Well, Bart, I think this is probably a really good time to summarise what we've spoken about today. I think what's fundamental here is that qualification isn't something that's a tick box exercise. It's not something that you can just follow as a process. It is a mindset, and actually you do need to be very present with where you are in your deal cycle to really actually know whether it's time to move forward or take a step back. But ultimately, we are also talking about restricting the urge to go into the sell to make sure that we've got enough information that we need to be able to not only influence the one person, but also the other stakeholders that are involved in the deal to actually make it happen. And through that discovery, it creates the momentum which enables that big leap forward, which is driving the need. And that's why the 3 whys are so fundamental. Why change something? Why us, and why now? So just want to say a big thank you. I think we've taken so much from that, and I think it's been a really, really great topic, and thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Yeah, happily done. It was a joy to talk about.
Amazing. Well, to all our listeners, thank you so much for joining in today's session. If you like what you heard, please share and subscribe. But a massive thank you to you, Bart, for joining us today. You've got a phenomenal reputation within the industry, so it's an absolute pleasure having you on the show. But again, to all our viewers, we look forward to welcoming you back for another mastery session soon. Thank you very much.